Okay, welcome to part 2 of Chapter 9, Managing for Business Success. This is part of Business 150 here at Wisconsin Lutheran College. So we spent the first video looking at the planning section, or the planning activities that a manager goes through. Now we want to talk about the second step, which is organizing. So organizing, by definition, is the management process of allocating resources to achieve our company plan. And there are different levels of managers that are assigned to certain tasks to be able to carry out the steps needed. So first and foremost, first we have what's called the top managers, and they're responsible for the overall health and performance of an organization. They are involved very little on the day-to-day operations. What they are looking at is making sure that the strategic plan and the strategic initiatives of the organization are being followed and reviewed and revised as needed so that the organization can continue to move forward. The second level is what we would call a middle manager, and they oversee the first line managers. In many cases, these are called directors, and directors have managers that report to them. So they oversee those first-line managers, and the first-line managers are supervising the employees on a day-in and day-out basis. So if you were working in a factory, for example, you might have a group of people in a particular area that report to a manager, and then a manager might report to a director, and that director has 4 or 5 or 6 different managers reporting to him or her, and then that director might report to a vice president, or in some cases a president of an organization. And so as you can see, there's a top-down view where, for example, the top manager might have 10 reports, and then each of the middle managers might have 10 or 15 reports, and then the first line managers might all have 10, 15, or 20 reports. So another key term is what we call the organizational structure, which is the arrangement of jobs in an organization that is most appropriate. And so what we want to look at is a few different types of organizational structure. Here is one that General Motors, a large car manufacturer, has what's called a product division structure. And so Buick, Cadillac, Chevy, GMC, all are independent products under the umbrella of General Motors. And so the Buick division or the GMC division has its own has its own president and vice presidents and accounting people and marketing people and engineers and so on. And so it's almost like 4 separate little companies all under one big company called General Motors. Sometimes companies are divided by customer, and in this case Johnson & Johnson is a manufacturer of products used in the health field, and so they have 3 different types of customers. They have the products that you and I buy in the grocery store or in the drugstore, that we go up to the shelf and purchase them. They call that their personal care and hygiene products. So that all of that activity dealing with that type of customer is in one division. And then they have a division that is manufactures and distributes prescription drugs. So you can imagine where the activities needed to develop and market and sell prescription drugs is totally different than the personal care and hygiene products. And then thirdly, they have medical devices and diagnostic products. And so again, those products might be sold to doctors, for example, or to clinics, elderly care homes, that type of thing. And so that customer is totally different than the prescription drugs, which is totally different than you and I going into a drugstore and picking something off the shelf. So they've aligned their company based on their customer. Here's one that is a process driven. So a large company that does tree cutting, and then from tree cutting they process the trees, and then they put it into different wood products or paper products. And so again, their processes are in Are there different divisions? And they again would probably have a president of the first process and a president of the chemical processing area, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, here is a geographical one, the infamous McDonald's, where again, based on the fact that there are so many locations across the United States, they break their organization down geographically. So they might have a vice president or president of the Northeast area and the Southeast and the Great Lakes and so on, because again, there are so many different locations that that's the best way for them to manage them. It probably wouldn't make much sense to do by product. You wouldn't have a product person for breakfast or a product person for dinner or something along those lines. So in this case, it makes most sense to do it geographically. So another key term then is an organizational chart, and that's a diagram that represents the relationships between one person in an organization and another. And your typical organization chart looks like this, where again you would have the owner or the president up here on the top. He or she would then have multiple people reporting to them, normally based on a group of people that do similar jobs. So all of the accounting people would be under the accounting manager. All of the marketing people would be under the head of marketing, same with operations, and then same with human resources. And so this person, the president or the owner, has 4 people reporting to them, each one of those people responsible for all of the functions underneath. So there is nothing listed here as accounting manager. That's because the chart would just get too big. So they simplify it by just showing some of the areas. So in the case of the marketing director, the marketing manager, the vice president of marketing, whatever that title would be, you'd have somebody responsible for advertising and somebody responsible for sales. And then underneath the sales manager, you would have all of the salespeople, and again over here in the advertising, you'd have all the advertising people. So it's a organizational chart designed to tell people who reports to whom, as well as what are the different areas of responsibility. So it's important to understand delegating authority. By definition, is entrusting work to subordinates. So if I go back here, each one of these people that have people underneath them have to delegate work to those people, because if they didn't, there's no way they could get it all done. And so it is important that they learn how to delegate. And it's also important that when you delegate to somebody, what you're doing is saying, I need you to do this for me. And then you give the employee the authority, and not just the authority, but the resources to get that job done. There are 2 types of decision making. Centralized decision making means that all of the decisions, or the greatest majority of the decisions, are made at the top, or in some cases made centrally. For example, a banking institution or a retail institution or a restaurant that has multiple locations might make their major decisions centrally. They would decide what is their menu going to look like, and how many locations are we going to have, and so on and so forth. That would be centralized decision making. Decentralized decision making is where they spread out those decisions throughout the organization, and that's done in the case of where there is a lot of locations, potentially with a lot of people. And to have all decisions or a lot of decisions made centrally just wouldn't make sense. So the third step in this process is directing. And when we look at directing, by definition, we call it the process that provides focus and direction to others. And then the key is to motivate them to achieve those goals. So from a leadership style, there are a couple different ways that people are I don't want to say that they are, but they have chosen to lead the people underneath them. So an autocratic makes decisions with very little input. Okay, they have a lot of experience. The situation may require that there's little time for input, and so the leader makes the decision. Think of an emergency situation where a large building is on fire, and the firefighters and the fire chief pulls up to the scene. And so the fire chief doesn't really have time, if you will, to call a little committee and say, how do you think we should do this? And so the person with that experience, the chief, that responsibility, makes decisions. You go here, you go there, we need to do this. Go into the building, don't go into the building. So autocratic doesn't mean a negative thing, for example. It's just that the decisions need to be made with little input. On the other side, a democratic type of leadership is where we get input from the people that we are working with, and then we take that into consideration when decisions are made and when policies are set. So again, if, for example, we have a large organization with a lot of salespeople and sales are declining or customer satisfaction is going down, having somebody sitting in an office somewhere trying to figure out why that's happening would make very little sense. And so you would get input from the different people in the different areas to try to figure out what the issue is. And then lastly, there is a type of leadership style called laissez-faire. It means hands-off. And so, for example, a leadership style might be to say to the people that work for you, these are the goals, these are the objectives, this is what needs to get done, and how you choose to do it, that's up to you folks. I'm not going to be involved on a day in and day out basis. What that allows you to pick and choose what you believe is best. Let me know if you have any issues or problems. Here are the goals. We just got to make sure we get the goals accomplished. There are two types of leadership styles generally, and that is what's called transactional, and that is where somebody works for somebody. It's based on rank, if you will, and if you do what I ask you to do, then you'll be satisfied, or I'll be satisfied, and it'll go well for you. So if you think again of a factory, the transactional authority is almost like an unwritten contract between the employee and the employer. If you come in to work on time and stay as long as you're supposed to and get done with what you are supposed to get done, you will get paid and you will keep your job. And it's this transaction. I don't know a lot about you. You don't know a lot about me, but we have this transactional relationship that we each have our job. And as long as we both get our jobs done, we'll both be happy. Transformational leadership is a different type of leadership where I get to know you as an individual, you get to know me as an individual, and because of that working relationship we have, you're motivated to get your job done, I'm motivated to find ways to help you, etc. And so the relationship between the two people is extremely important. So lastly, we're going to talk about controlling. The key term is what we do to compare actual to planned performance and how do we correct it if it doesn't go as planned. And we're really talking about 5 key steps. And it's important that we look at all 5 steps. So first of all, we have to set standards. Why is that important? So that everybody knows what needs to be done and what we're going to be measuring on. So if I'm a sales manager and I say to my salespeople, I need everybody to make 10 sales calls a week, that's the standard. Now, there's an old saying that says you need to inspect what you expect, and that's measuring performance. Okay, keep track how many sales calls, write up a report. Those type of things are designed to measure performance. Compare the two and figure out who's doing well and who's not. And then what is the reason for the deviation? So in some cases, maybe the salesperson is not doing his or her job. In other cases, maybe 10 is not feasible because the customers that they're working with need more care than other areas of the company. And as a result, if we would try too hard to get 10 sales calls a week, we would lose our customers because of the fact they need more time than that. And then lastly, take corrective action. So the key is to figure out what it is we want to do, measure it, why isn't it working, and then take corrective action. Not to assume that that's always the same issue. Thanks, and have a good day.